Hey folks, welcome back to the shop where we go over tips and tricks and frequently asked questions to make sure that you get the most out of your Redline bow hunting gear. My name is Wes Brown, field producer and resident bow technician for Redline Bowhunting, and today we're going to be going over, is it you or is it your equipment? It's definitely you, so if you guys have any comments, drop them down below, and thanks for watching. All right, for real. Yeah, is it your equipment or is it you? I would say that 90% of the time it's probably us as archers, and it's a very easy scapegoat to blame our equipment for whatever's happening downrange with our arrow and how we're shooting. But at the end of the day, like, we have to look to ourselves as archers and be humble enough to understand that it might be just us that is not shooting properly. And you know, when we talk about form and the proper way of shooting, that's so very subjective across the board in archery. And I always try to be careful because, you know, somebody who doesn't shoot the way I shoot may be a better shot than me, and I don't agree with how they're shooting. But what I'm going to do today is kind of lay out some guidelines and hopefully point out a few things that you can think about when you're not shooting how you feel like you should be shooting. Maybe because our form has deteriorated, we're not thinking through our mantra properly, you know, and then I'm even going to talk about a few things that you can look for on your bow after you've evaluated yourself. So before we get really into it any further, again, I'm always going to urge you guys to utilize your local pro shop or one of our trusted dealers that you can find on our website, because in something like this, they're going to be able to have a hands-on experience with you, and hopefully, you know, you walk away with a little bit more knowledge than you would if you just watched me on YouTube or social media. But so make sure you utilize those guys. They definitely know what they're doing. They live it. You know, when you're, you know, in the off season not shooting your bow, they're shooting. They're working on bows. So it's a constant for them. That's their living. And so they live archery every single day, and they're going to be able to see certain things that maybe you're overlooking, no matter how proficient you think you might be. I might get into a few rabbit holes in this, and I'm going to try to hit some important aspects of our own selves as archers, and along with some of our equipment. And if you guys have any questions at all, or you want me to do a video that dives a little bit deeper into some of the subjects that I talk about today, by all means, drop us a comment or shoot us an email to customer service, and we'll make sure to try to put something out that would tailor to maybe your specific question. And but without going any further, let's talk about torque. Torque is probably one of the leading issues when it comes to how our arrow is flying downrange and where it hits. And I'm just going to throw a scenario at you guys and then kind of go over a couple things that I would look for in myself before I would take a bow back to the shop or before I put it on the press here at home. So, torque. What is torque? Torque is something that the archer will introduce to a bow that would pretty much make the arrow not fly true. It'll come out at an angle that it really shouldn't be coming out of. And then I'll also talk about some people will want to fix their center shot to the torque that they have, and I'll kind of explain why that might be a bad idea. But anyway, let's just talk about torque. And really the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about torque is how you grip the bow. Now with the torque, I'll show you on the bow. When I draw the bow back, when I draw this bow back here, the string obviously comes back to my face, and then it should be, in most bows, most instances, be lined up with your cams as best as possible. And the torque is when your string comes off to the right or comes off to the left, or reverse for however you're looking at me here. But that would be torque, and introducing it, there's different ways you can introduce torque to your bow that you really don't want to. The first is going to be the grip. Now when you look at a bow and its grip right off the bat, if you give somebody who's never touched a bow before and they grab the grip on the bow, they're going to grab it like this, and where your knuckles are straight up and down. Now some of you might grab your bow like this, and maybe you are successful and you've figured out a way to not introduce a lot of torque or what have you. But at the end of the day, this is not a good way to grip your bow, because when subconsciously your brain is going to try to keep your bow hand from letting go of that bow. So when you're in full draw, you're about to release your arrow. Subconsciously, sometimes we're going to want to grip that bow really hard so that it doesn't fall out of our hands, or we get so excited we forget about our grip and we grip our bow a little bit too hard and introduce unneeded torque. So I'm just going to show you on, so with the scenario, before I show you, The scenario is I just got back from my bow shop. They set my bow up with Redline gear. It looks freaking sweet. They put it to my draw length. I shot it at 20 yards. It's perfect. And I leave with just so much confidence. Like, I have the best bow. We're ready to go. I get home, I'm shooting at 20 yards, and I'm hitting dimes. I can't miss. And then I move back to 30, and now I'm a little to the left. And I'm like, well, what the heck? You know, like, I know they paper tuned it. Everything's been great. But now I'm hitting maybe 2 or 3 inches left. I'm like, okay, well, maybe that's me. I'm pulling the shot, or I'm pushing the shot, whatever. And then I'm like, well, let's go back to 40. So I go back to 40, and now I'm like 6 to almost a foot, 6 inches to almost a foot to the left. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? What am I doing? It has to, I just got this bow. It should be perfect, you know, but man, they must have set it up wrong. And then, sorry, I have an itch. And then, just out of curiosity, I'm gonna go back to 50, and now I'm almost missing the target, way left. So then I go back to 30. Let me take my sight and just sight it in at 30. Maybe at 20 yards it's too close, and I'm too far off or whatever. And at 30 yards, I put it to where I'm hitting the bullseye again. I go to 40, and I'm just a little bit to the left again, but it's like, okay, no big deal. I go back to 20. Now I'm missing right, and it's like, what the heck is going on? And now let's assume that the bow has been built perfect, and I am humble enough to sit there and think, well, maybe it's me, and I have to evaluate what's happening. The first thing I would look for is my grip. And when I grip my bow like this, if I'm gripping it like this, like I said not to, and now watch when I grip the bow. When I put any type of grip in my hand to the bow, watch what it does. See how it twists in my hand? So that would be torque, and that type of torque would take my string off to the left of my cams. And so to fix that, I always try to grab the bow like this. So my knuckles are at a 45-degree angle almost, and then if I wanted to, I could fit a golf ball right in here, right? I could fit a golf ball right there, and I'm barely touching it with my first three fingers, my pinky being off, and then I'm not gripping. But if I do grip, watch what happens to the bow. See how there's very little movement? So with that grip, not only am I alleviating really any twist in my riser when I pull back, but if I do grip the bow, I'm not introducing really any more torque in the bow than maybe something that my arrow can recover from. And when it comes to those two things, those are really the biggest things when it comes to torque, and that's going to affect your left and right shot and how your arrow flight is. So sometimes you might see your arrow come off the bow and maybe it tailed off to the left or tailed off to the right. That's going to be probably one of your biggest issues when it comes to you as the archer. It's going to be your grip. The next thing we want to look for is our shoulder. Are we tired? If we are tired, there are some things that will start deteriorating within our form, and one of them being your shoulder. And now when you're holding that bow out, obviously the bow weighs, you know, maybe 5.5, 6 pounds, depending on the bow and the setup that you have to it. And after 10, 20, 30 shots, depending on how much you shoot, that shoulder will start getting tired, and you're going to want to start creeping up into your ear. And that tension right there will introduce some torque. It'll introduce some deterioration within your form. And then maybe your draw length will actually start seeming a little bit too long. And then your anchor points are not in the right spot. And then your peep sight seems like it's in the wrong spot. And now we have the plethora of things that we can start blaming our bow for, when really it's as simple as just we're tired. So put the bow down, take a break, and then come back to it and try to figure out the problem. The next thing is going to be your anchor points, and where maybe you put your release hand up next to your face. So for me, I use a thumb release, and so my hand's almost in a clenched fist, and I come back with my 2 knuckles and I pin them in right at the point of my jaw, and it's a really good anchor point for me. And then my nose goes to the string, and I look through the peep sight. But at the end of the day, if I tend to really jam my hand up into my jawline, or if I do that, then I want to press against it with my head, because there's that opposition reflex that happens. If you push on something, a lot of times that thing wants to push back, or if you're pulling, it's going to want to pull back away from you. And it's kind of the same way subconsciously. We jam our release hand into our face, and we really start pushing in to make sure we're in that right spot for our anchor point, and you're going to start introducing torque in that manner as well. So those are some things you really want to think about when it comes to what you're doing wrong and what you're introducing to that bow that really shouldn't be there at all. So we've talked about ourselves a little bit. Let's talk about the bow and a couple things that could be wrong with it if it is not you, and if it's not in fact you being the problem. And that's going to be, the biggest thing is going to be our center shot. And the center shot is how our D loop here is lined up with our rest. And obviously you have your string, and then you have the middle of the bow that goes right through the grip, and then you have your rest. And obviously when the arrow rests on the rest, it being canted to the left or canted to the right can have a big difference on your flight out past certain distances. Now, what happens a lot of times is people have a torque in their bow and they refuse to fix it, or you have someone who's teaching you and they refuse to try to help you through that. And I almost bet it goes hand in hand, because if you are not willing to change or to take in more tools to make you a better archer, the people trying to do that for you are going to stop, and they're just going to be like, fine, if that's the way you want to do it, I'll just fix your bow to your torque. It's not the right answer. So be open with whoever's trying to help you guys out. Just be open, because they might not be tools you'll use right now, but there might be tools that you could get from someone teaching you that'll help you along the way further down the road. And it's just good knowledge to have. But at the end of the day, we don't want to fix the bow to our problems. We want to fix our problems to what we would call a perfect bow. So if someone's torquing to the left, you might want, some people would want to move the rest to the right or left, however it is, and it's just not the right thing to do. You want your center shot almost perfect, and then you want yourself to be almost perfect. So there's a lot of aspects to pay attention to, and to fix the torquing and by yourself, the best thing to do is get a video camera, your cell phone, and have it set up behind you to where you can see where that string is lined up with your bow, and you can see it coming off to the left or coming off to the right from the cams. Or if you have somebody with you, they can be behind you and they can tell you, okay, your string is coming off to the left. And you can manipulate your hand a little bit, your bow arm hand, to kind of fix that. And then also if you take your hat off, you can, while you're at full draw in your anchor points, you can look up. And you can look up where your string and see if it's lined up with your cam. Now, some bows are different. Some bows have a different cam lean, so it's not a foolproof method, but it's definitely something to think about if you are having those left and right issues at distance. And then obviously when we talk about equipment again, it's our sight. So if you haven't watched any of my videos in the past, I have some axis point videos, and it goes over the second axis point and what that affects. And if your second axis point is not set up properly on your movable sight, you will find a lot of left and right misses the further back in distance you go, because that pin is going to be angled down. So if this is the level playing field, my pin is right in the middle of this scope and it's tilted like this, and I start moving my yardage dial down, it's going to start to want to angle. And if it starts angling down, the further down I go, the further left I'm going to miss. And then it's obviously the further right you're going to miss if it's out the other way, because it'll start coming, as you move down, it'll start moving off to the left and you'll have your right miss. You guys can fact check me on that. I might have it messed up in my brain, but yeah. And so now talking about us again, moving away from the equipment, because it's not about the equipment really. It's about us. And as archers, we got to have something that keeps us consistent and it keeps us on track. And for me, it's called a mantra. Now, if you don't know what a mantra is, it's kind of a process that you go through your head to a task that may be important to you, or maybe something that you have to be very consistent with. So with archery, for me, I have a very specific mantra on what I do before my shot. And I do it so often that most of it I don't even think about. But if I tried to think back on the last shot I did, I could go through my head and be like, okay, I thought about this, oh, I forgot about this. That's probably why I have a high miss, or that's probably why I'm 3 inches to the right. So I'll just go over my mantra, guys, and then we'll kind of end this video. And if you guys have any more questions that you'd want me to go in depth with, just shoot them down here in the comments. But so my mantra starts like this. I'm facing you, but my target is this way, so to my left, because I want my body bladed to my target. The first thing that is going to happen is I have the bow in my hand, right? So the bow is in my hand, and I'm always going to make sure that the bow feels perfect in my hand in the grip that I like to be in. That's just going to set me up for success when I go to draw back. The next thing I'm going to do is my feet. I want to make sure that my feet are perpendicular to the target. So if I put an arrow directly to the tips of my toes, that arrow is going to point directly at the target that I'm going after. And then I'm going to make sure my feet are not any wider than my shoulders and they're not touching. I want to be able to stay within that range as if I was in a tree stand or just on a regular cement pad, or maybe even unlevel ground. We just want to make sure that our feet are not out past our shoulders and they're not put together, so we have good balance. The next is my knees. I don't want to lock my knees out. I want to keep them nice and bent. The next I'm thinking about is my hips. I don't want my hips way forward and I don't want them way back. I want them nice and straight with my knees. I want my entire body to be this straight up statue where my spine is perfectly aligned with my tailbone and going straight down through the middle of my body, along with my nose. So now I have my grip, I have my feet, I have my knees, and I have my hip. Now, once I get through that, I start looking at my target and I'm visualizing where I want my arrow to go. Some of this can sound kind of cheesy, but this is something I think about constantly, and it's worked for me for so long, to a point where when I can't think about anything else, I'm gonna shoot a big old buck. I've done it so often, it just goes straight through my head and I'm able to make a good clean shot. So I'm visualizing the target and where I want the arrow to go. And now when I visualize, as I'm visualizing my target and where I want my arrow to go, I put my release on my D-loop and I create a little bit of tension so that I can feel where the grip on my hand is. And creating that tension really kind of makes it a little more solid and it's not going to slip. Next is I'm going to make sure my shoulders and my chest are nice and tall. And I'm not really pushing my chest out, but I'm making sure that my entire body is nice and tall, and then allow that to happen up into my neck, into my face. I don't want to look up. I don't want to, I don't want my there's a big problem a lot of people can have is where, I kind of tend to sit like this. And if I don't consciously talk about it or think about it in my head will want to do this. And I don't want that. That's going to change my anchor point. So I got to make sure that my neck and spine, they're all as perfectly aligned as possible. My nose is right in the center of my body. Everything's nice and center. Once I do that, then I look to my target. And as I look to my target, I'm visualizing again, and then I pull through my shot. So I come back. As I'm drawing, I'm thinking about my grip, I'm thinking about my hips, I'm thinking about all this alignment, and then I come into my first anchor point, which is my two knuckles into the point of my jaw, and then my nose to the string for my second anchor point, and then I look through my peep, I align my peep with my sight scope, and then what I do, a lot of people do it differently, but what I do, because I had target panic, I would go from my 6 o'clock of the target, and I would move my pin to the 9, and I would slowly move it into the center of the target that I'm trying to shoot. And for me, it's just taking the years of understanding what works for me and what keeps me consistent. And that's my shot. And then I sit there and I breathe through everything that I'm doing. And then in my head, I'm almost trying to break that bow at where my grip is. I'm trying to break right through it because I want to stay in that back wall. I want to give all the energy to my bow. And then with my thumb release, I just slowly pull through that shot, and hopefully it's a good one. I try not to force any shots. I try to make them as kind of flawless as possible, or effortless, if you will. But that's my mantra. So I always I'm always going to urge you guys, if you're trying to figure out what's wrong with you, or is it my equipment or is it me? Think about a mantra. Really start to think about everything that you're doing and put them into steps, because if you put them into steps that you can check off in your brain every single time, write them down. And make sure you're going through those steps, because that's going to alleviate a lot of issues that might come out from a bad shot. And it's also going to allow you to pinpoint issues within your equipment. So if you do have equipment issues and you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing on your body, then you can pinpoint the little bit of issues that might be on your bow, to the point where it might be a 1/16 of an inch that your rest is off to the left, and you're just doesn't seem like you're hitting right, or your paper tune's not perfect. There's so many little things that can happen in our equipment, and we want to blame the equipment for this big broad view of issues, when really, if we just worked on ourselves as archers and as really people in our lives, if we just work on ourselves and focus on that, a lot of things will start falling into place, whether we're target shooting or we're hunting a big buck in Kansas. So Hopefully this helped you out, guys. Hopefully it's kind of put a little bit of fire in your brains to start thinking about certain aspects of your shot. It'll definitely make you a better archer. And again, guys, if you guys have any issues or any questions that you would like me to dive a little bit deeper into, drop them in the comments or shoot an email to our customer service, and we'll make sure that I get a video out to you kind of specific to what you're trying to figure out. But again, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.